With all the noise surrounding the Arizona Cardinals and what the future of this roster will look like, it comes down to a very simple question. How do you build a winning roster? Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter, Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen. Free wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please go to the YouTube channel, search Locked On Arizona Cardinals, hit that subscribe button, turn notifications on. You know the drill. Been in sports media in Phoenix since 2011, going into my 9th damn season hosting this podcast. And I still can't figure out the Cardinals. So if you believe that as well, you're not alone. This is a safe space. I was going to pivot to the NFC West, the knuckleheads that host Locked On Rams and Locked On 49ers, respectively. I wanted to do a little bit of a palate cleanser first. One of the smartest and nicest people in this space. Let's do something with nice people. And then we can talk with Travis Rogers and Brian Peacock. You guys will be resigned to your fate later in the week. Marcus, thanks for joining me, dude.
Of course. Thanks for having me on. I certainly don't I don't need that introduction. I don't deserve it, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, listen, dude, with the people I talk to in the NFC West, trust me, you deserve the introduction. But we'll talk to those boys later, later in the week about, what they've done, what the 49ers and the Rams have done specifically on building their rosters, which are completely different from each other. So that'll be fascinating. But Marcus hosts Locked On Cowboys. I'm going to save that hat that he wears until the final segment so we can pitter around the Micah Parsons conversation. I had that first 2 months ago. Marcus got very mad at me on Twitter, and then now people are picking
mad.
You can have the conversation. We'll talk about that in the last segment. That'll be fun. But more importantly, specifically surrounding the Cardinals and roster building, Marcus' history with Pro Football Focus, now with the 33rd team and everywhere in between, he's been around roster builds through the draft, free agency, and everything in between. And I wanted to pick your brain about this specifically. So, dictionary definition in a vacuum, with removing the outlier of, well, there's so many different ways to build a roster. What's the way that works more than not?
First, this is so simple, but having good players works, right? Now, we can debate on which positions and which spots are more valuable than the other. I think for the most part, we understand what the money 5 positions are, right? Quarterback, wide receiver, offensive tackle, edge rusher, corner. But if you look like historically at the teams that make it to the Super Bowl, not only just the Super Bowl winners, but the teams that make it to the Super Bowl, they generally have 7 or 8 blue chip bona fide studs. And if your roster doesn't have that, it's really, really hard to be one of those elite teams. So if you can find an elite player, whether it's at receiver, whether it's at defensive tackle or corner, you go out and get them. And we're going to talk about the Cardinals here in a little bit, but you look at this roster, I think they have a lot of good players. I think they have some depth and some really good spots. But how many superstars do they have on this team? I think that's got to be priority number one, is just getting some more of those top-end talented players.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So for those that, every day, that I don't script these. I don't tell them the questions I'm going to ask beforehand. I kind of do topics and we just kind of riff. That is not what I was expecting you to say specifically. I thought you were going to say offensive line, defensive line, and then everything else. But many different ways to skin a cat, many different ways to build out a roster. So are you saying that if you have 2 Pro Bowl corners, a Pro Bowl interior defensive lineman, a really good quarterback, and 1 good receiver, that could be enough, where other people would have a bona fide stud offensive line, defensive line, and the rest kind of fell into place? It doesn't really matter as long as the talent is on the roster.
Yeah,
allocation.
Yeah, because then you can build your coaching staff and your scheme based around your talent. Listen, I know Philadelphia this year has made it where no matter what theory you like in team building, it fits because they've got 2 awesome receivers. They've got an awesome running back, an awesome defensive line, an awesome offensive line. So they fit every kind of team building category. But I think for the most part, there are a lot of different ways to win in the NFL, but you still need that top end talent, because ultimately that's the difference in these games is, can your superstars outplay the other team's superstars? And right now for the Cardinals, I just don't think they have enough of them.
Yeah. And after the last regime experiment failed, it had some peaks, but failed. Monty Ossenfort was tasked, and I've said this to you, and I've said this on the show a bunch, like what Steve Keim did. You have a friend growing up who comes over, plays with all your toys, makes a whole mess, and leaves without cleaning them up. That's kind of what Steve Keim did, where it's like, here, it's your created mess now. enjoy. And the turnover in roster over the last 2 off seasons is incredibly large percentage-wise. So I think this year, even though Cardinals fans hate to hear this every year, next year is the year. This is the year where it's like either it's going to work with Kyler Murray and the roster build or it won't. So at least you have that solace. Marcus, where are they far away from? You said they're not there yet. What are the biggest glaring needs that you see on this roster, even from a surface level, that they need to address immediately?
I think most of them are on defense. Yes, they could add a number 2 receiver. They could get a little bit better on the offensive line, even though that unit played really well, thanks to a guy named Clayton Adams, who I don't know if you heard, Alex, but coordinator over in Dallas. Thank you very much. It's defense, right? And I think if I were to pin down the positions, it's interior defensive line, it's edge rusher, and it's linebacker. And you could actually convince me that linebacker is the biggest of the 3 needs. It's the least important of those 3 needs, right? And I think that's why we'll talk about the draft in a second. You're seeing so many defensive linemen mocked to Arizona in rounds 1 or round 2. But I think that front 6, that front 7 is where Arizona really needs to attack this offseason.
And Marcus_Mosher on Twitter, he is the host or one of the hosts of Locked On Cowboys. Him and Landon McCool do a great job over there. 33rd team history in football for the last almost 2 decades. I am in the camp before we get to, position groups, because the Cardinals have been mocked to take 2 corners in the first 2 rounds, 2 offensive linemen, a wide receiver in court. I want to pick your brain on that. My thought process with the young core on defense of, Garrett Williams, who I knew you loved coming out of college, Budda Baker, Adrian Taylor-Demerson, who I knew you loved coming out of college. Max Melton played pretty well last year. Darius Robinson coming back with a supporting cast in the interior. Bisha Ojulari, we'll see what he is. That adding proven talent on defense immediately and drafting on offense, I see as more of an easy button to get going instead of drafting an interior defensive lineman, hoping it's Jalen Carter or hoping it's the next Leonard Williams. When you can get a pass rush, you can get an interior defensive lineman and go and just pay a premium for it.
So generally the best strategy for building a team that's a winner year in and year out is to use your premium picks on the offensive side of the ball and keep those guys and use the rest of your draft for the depth, right? Because a lot of times on defense, you're really only as good as your, second or third worst player. You can cover up one guy, but it's that second and third worst guy that are hard to cover up. So that's not a bad strategy to me. If you feel like there's a receiver in this class at pick 16 that absolutely can come in and play alongside Marvin Harrison Jr. and with Trey McBride, and it makes your offense that much more explosive, that's fine. Just get ready for the next 5 picks, 6 picks to all be on defense. And frankly, they need depth as much as they need the star power. But you're right on defensive linemen. Like if you're drafting a defensive lineman in round 1, thinking he's going to come in and give you 9 sacks right away and be somebody that dominates double teams, it doesn't happen. Even for the elite defensive tackles like Quinnen Williams and Dexter Lawrence and Derek Brown, all 3 of those guys really didn't start getting going until year 3. So you have to have some lowered expectations there.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, offensive line should be 16. Best offensive lineman available. And I know that it's like, well, that was probably the strongest 0-1 jump of any position group the Cardinals had, probably corner also. But if this is the last year of the Kyler Murray experiment, whether it's going to go in perpetuity or it's going to end, you need to know. And the best way to know is for him not to have a dirty jersey for as much of the season as possible. And irrespective of if he's the quarterback or not, it's going to bolster, you would hope, the interior of the offensive line, which was the weak spot, if there is one. On that. So, I mean, I don't think you could have a good enough offensive line.
No, it's not possible.
So that's me. It's like set and forget. Set one, draft the best one, and move the hell on.
Kyler Murray is a magician on most plays, but you don't need him to. You don't want him to have to try to figure things out on every single play because of bad offensive line play. And just to be clear, the Arizona did not have a bad offensive line last year. But if you can just take away 2 extra QB hits a game or make the running game just a little bit more efficient, that's going to go a long ways, not only to helping your offense, but also helping your defense. It's really nice if your defense only has to give up 21 points every single game to win. You can talk me into an offensive lineman in the middle of round 1 every day for every single team in the NFL.
Marcus Mosher, Locked On Cowboys, which we'll touch on in the final segment. 33rd team for everything else, Cardinals draft, Cardinals roster building. Coming up next, the Cardinals have been mocked to draft pretty much every position outside of quarterback in the first 2 rounds by different entities. Where does Marcus think they should go? We'll discuss the next Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I'm seeing stuff all over the internet of people doing first basket score, putting $5 in or something and parlaying 3 of them, winning a couple $1,000 if they all hit. It's crazy. FanDuel, you can do any sort of mismatch, any way to put some cheese down. FanDuel's got you covered right now. New FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Marcus Mosher joining me. The Locked On 49ers and Rams guys will be later in the week. Thanks for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen. Kind of taking a step back, looking from a bird's eye view of the options that the Cardinals have, because Monty Ossenfort et al. Can't miss this offseason. I mean, this is it. Their expectations, they won 8 games last year. They're close. They were, in arm's reach of the NFC West crown before completely cratering. Marcus, getting right to it. The Cardinals have their bevy of picks in the first 5 rounds. Centralizing around the first 2. If you were Monty Ossenfort, where would you go?
So one of the first things that I would do is I would look at the strengths of this draft and see where I can get the most bang for my buck and try to figure out a way to sequence this draft where I'm getting 3 starters at 3 key positions. One of the things that I do, and you can go check it out on Twitter, is I do this expert consensus board where I take the top 10 NFL draft analysts, and you guys know who they are: Daniel Jeremiah, Dane Brugler, Mike Renner, all those guys. Mm-hmm. And I put their boards into an Excel spreadsheet and then average out the rankings. And one of the things that's become very obvious in this class is that it's a great edge rusher class in round 1. Inside the top 20 right now, we have 6 edge rushers: Abdul Carter, Jalen Walker, Micah Williams, James Pierce, Shamar Stewart, and Mike Green. I think all of those guys could be top 10 picks. They won't all be, though, because of the way this draft is going to shake out. So if you can grab a edge rusher at 16 that in most drafts would probably go higher than that, I think that's a very good strategy here, because Arizona needs an edge rusher. I don't think you're going to get the caliber. You're not going to get a starting caliber edge rusher in round 2. Grab that guy in round 1, and we're on our way to making this defense more respectable.
And that is, if hit, that saves a lot of cheese for 4 years at a premium position. So obviously that's a double down where not only you get the impact right away you'd hope, but also be pennies on the dollar comparatively speaking to what the second contract would be. If it's not edge rusher, I know interior defensive line is a very deep class for interior defensive line as well, or defensive line in general. Mm-hmm. Is that something where you can get fringe first round talent in the second round? We saw a lot of first round mock talent go into the top and middle of the second round last year.
So generally when you're drafting, you want to be drafting guys that are being ranked or believed to be like 3 to 4 spots higher than what you're picking in round 1. That's generally how you get the most value. And I know value is all dependent on what you think of the player, but if you're looking at like why consensus board matters, the teams that draft players below their ADPs generally hit. That's why the Eagles have had so much success with Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith. You guys know the names right now. But when I look at the defensive tackle class, we only have 1 defensive tackle that's being currently ranked inside of the top 20, and that's Mason Graham. Sorry, Cardinal fans, you're not getting Mason Graham at 16. I apologize. After that, it's the Kenneth Grant, the Walter Nolans, and those guys are good prospects, but are they prospects that you should be drafting at 16? Personally, when I look at those guys, I think no. I think those are more late first round guys. I understand why people are mocking them to Arizona, because they see, hey, defensive line is the #1 need for the Cardinals. Let's give them Walter Nolan. I just don't think that necessarily is the right value spot in round 1.
Got it. Yeah, because I mean, the thing that I've been going back and forth with is, do you double down on the strength positions that you have now, because one rookie, one drafted player on the interior defensive line with Bilal Nichols and Justin Jones coming back, etc., isn't going to be the 0-1 jump necessary to make that in the trenches on the defensive side a force. If you draft an offensive lineman, that could go from B+ to A, and that is a jump where you double down. The Cardinals for so long, Marcus, have had weak spots on this roster. They haven't had the strength that you can trust and rely upon. So why not double down on those positions so you at least know, set and forget every week, that is a group that can be trusted. So that's a thing for me. I know pass rush is a little bit different, though.
Yeah, I mean, generally, you want to make your strength stronger. It's not the most well-rounded team that usually wins the Super Bowl, although that was the case this year. It's the teams that have, I mean, although Philadelphia did have the strongest strength. I mean, their defensive line was better than any other unit in the league. Their offensive line was better than any other unit in the league. You want to have one or two positional groups that you feel like no matter who you play, they're going to dominate. And if you can get, to me, 2 edge rushers in this class, whether it's maybe you take a Mike Green at 16 and then you come back in round 2 and you grab, name your guy, Jack Sawyer or Landon Jackson or whoever it may be. I don't think that's a bad strategy either.
Okay. One more thing before we get to the Micah Parsons circus talk here. Most pundits that I trust, including you, have alluded to the meat of this draft being mid-first round to like the beginning of the third, where it's like you can get all you want in those 60 picks or whatever it is, 50 picks. At 16, barring any sort of, precipitous drop by a top 8 guy that ends up dropping to the Cardinals' lap, is a trade back to pick up a second, maybe move back 10 picks, 12 picks to pick up a second or an early third. Would that benefit a team like the Cardinals that desperately need a lot?
Absolutely. And if you look at this draft, I mean, you can get starting caliber players at big time positions in the 30s, 40s, and 50s in this draft. So yeah, I think you want to try to accumulate as many of those top 50, top 75 picks as possible. And I do think the Cardinals are sitting in a really good position for two different positions. Number one is wide receiver. There's always teams out there that need receivers. And that's one of the positions that, again, historically, we've seen teams trade up to try to go get. And if you look at a couple of the teams drafting behind the Cardinals, including the Broncos and the Steelers, who desperately need receivers, I think somebody like Luther Burden, Emeka Egbuka, if they're still on the board at 16, I think Arizona is a natural trade partner. But the other one that makes even more sense for Arizona are the tight ends. Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland. We know that Arizona doesn't need a tight end, but again, we've had Sean Payton this week talking about why they need to get a joker tight end. There's a couple teams behind Denver that would love to add a Tyler Warren to their offense. So if Tyler Warren, Loveland, Egbuka, Luther Burden are all on the board when the Cardinals pick, I think they're going to have plenty of trade offers. And if you can drop from 16 to 22, pick up either a second round pick, a third round pick, I think you do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, but you're looking at third as the floor. Like you're not looking at something where because that wouldn't benefit them with the draft calculator wise in this draft.
No, and maybe it's even something different like, hey, give us your second and we'll give us our third. We'll move up 30 spots, right? Like I think those kind of trades make sense. And we've seen the Cardinals do trades like that in the past with this new front office. I wouldn't rule that out as well.
Yeah, because that's the thing that I've been mentioning, even though it's kind of a mud in the muck after the week 11 bye for the Cardinals last year. It's like, they've got all the money. They got over $70 million to spend. They've got all their picks in the first 5 rounds. This is what dreams are made of with an analytical guy like Monty Ossenfort, who he's got all of the crayons in the Crayola box to color with, and it's going to be fascinating to see what they do. Now, Marcus, sometimes I say smart things on this show once a month. Okay, that's my quota. This one has fascinated me from afar for a long time, and we're going to put your Locked On Cowboys host hat on next. We're going to talk about Micah Parsons. I hope he doesn't throw something at me through the screen. We'll discuss that next. Marcus Mosher, Locked On Cowboys, Locked On Dynasty, 33rd team, etc. Joining me. One more segment. We'll be right back. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Like, listen, Prize Picks is stepping up their games, man. Prize Picks has like the market cornered for daily fantasy. It's awesome. And football season may be over, but basketball's in full swing. And there's no better way to stay in on the action with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you can just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections. And if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. 1,000 times, more or less. It's crazy. You can get the things done in 60 seconds. Withdrawals, like, so say you cash in something, the withdrawal process, you can get your money in your account in like 15 minutes. As quick as 15 minutes. That's bananas. It makes it so easy. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right. At Marcus_Mosher. So here's the thing. How this Micah Parsons thing came up for me, it was a list of, other names, Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, people in positions who either make a lot of money in bad spots or haven't begun their making a lot of money in a spot that maybe can't pay him the money that he wants. That's where kind of the spark. And I looked around the league and I'm like, okay, Micah Parsons, there's no way this is going to happen. And the Cardinals have the ability to make it happen if he were to become available. And with everything that Jerry and Stephen Jones have been saying about how they have no money and they saw Derrick Henry walk and they paid Dak, the GDP of Greenland, and then CeeDee Lamb, like Micah Parsons very well could be an odd person out if you look at it rationally. That's not what's going to happen. Talk to me about why there's no way, even if the money doesn't make sense, that he's not going to be wearing a different uniform come 2025 and beyond. So
Micah Parsons is their best player by a wide stretch, right? Their defense last year when he was out was the worst in the league by far. He comes back in and they're immediately performing like a top 10 unit. Despite not having that much talent on defense, he is somebody that they drafted. They always overvalue players that they draft. Yes. He's a superstar, and the Cowboys love superstars. They love having guys like Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott that they can throw on banners and put at the top of the program before the game. They love stars. So I don't think the Cowboys are even going to consider a Micah Parsons trade. Now, we heard something from Tom Pelissero from NFL Network on Sunday morning of the Super Bowl saying the Cowboys have had discussions about trading Micah Parsons. Here's how those discussions probably went, Alex. Hey, what do you think we could get for Micah in a trade if we put him out there? Oh, 3 first-round picks? Oh, no, you don't think that much? All right, cool. All right, let's move on. Those kind of discussions happen all the time. Like just offhand stuff. Like, hey, if we got offered this, this, and this, would we have to have like a 3-hour meeting about trading Micah? They have no plans to trade Micah. But if they did, I think this is how it goes. The Cowboys would come to the realization that they are spending so much money on Dak and CeeDee. They have Tyler Smith, their all-pro guard, they have to pay. Trayvon Diggs, their all-pro corner, they're paying right now. Their other all-pro corner, Deron Bland, is up for a contract. Their star defensive tackle, Osa Odigizua, is up for a contract. Maybe they come to the realization, like, even if we pay Micah $39 million a year, we're just not going to be good enough. And if we can get a Godfather offer from some other team to reset the talent and get a little bit cheaper, we would at least have to think about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like paying Dak kind of just screwed the pooch, eh? I mean,
well, no, because I think you had to.
80 mil this year or something? Well, like he's not movable.
Well, no, yes, his cap number's high. That's going to be restructured to give the Cowboys some cap space. But you don't have an option. You have a top 10 quarterback. And again, you can fight me on whether he's a top 10, top 12 quarterback. I don't care. Right? You have a quarterback. You don't give that up, because if you give that up, all of a sudden you're like the 20 other teams in the league that are trying to talk themselves into, hey, maybe Russell Wilson at age 38 will be good again. Or maybe Rodgers at 42 can be a solid quarterback. So yes, it's a lot of money, but you have to do it when you have that guy. Yeah. And Kyler Murray, loathers, listen to what Marcus just said. Yeah. It's so much worse out in open waters than you think. It's so much worse. It's unfathomable how much worse it is. Now, if you're the Cardinals, okay, and let's just talk hypotheticals because it's the offseason. It's not silly season yet, but you're the Cardinals. You've got $70 million to spend. You've got a bunch of young guys you could trade away. You've got the picks to be able to do it. I mean, I don't see a world where 2 firsts and Darius Robinson or something like a package like that, where it's like,
yes, you trade away 2 first-round picks, and you also get a player. People forget you get the player, where it's like you get a superstar who's 25 or whatever he is, who's going to be a Luka Doncic for the next 7 or 8 years. And yes, you're going to have to pay him. Good players require big contracts. And then you're off to the bleeping races, Marcus. Like, that's why not? If there were an opportunity, do it. Who cares? Aside from trading away Trey McBride or Marvin Harrison Jr., trade anybody.
Well, and that was going to be my next question is,
of course,
let's really think outside the box here. Like, if Dallas were to trade Micah, I can guarantee you the first thing they would ask was, hey, let's flip Marvin Harrison Jr. for Micah Parsons. What do you think the Cardinals say there?
I would do it in a heartbeat. Personally, I would do it in a heartbeat. Marvin, because it would negate an extra first-round pick, because pretty much you're swapping. So you're giving Marvin Harrison Jr. a first and a third from Micah Parsons and a fourth or something like that.
Yep.
I would do that in an absolute, no doubt about it, heartbeat, because there's 2 reasons. One, I said this as he was getting drafted. You and I were talking before the draft multiple times. I said he's going to be the third option on this team out the gate. It's going to be Trey McBride. It's going to be James Conner 1 and 1A. Flip him how you want in a run-first offense. And that's what it was. He showed flashes of insane, elite, bona fide wide receiver 1. He showed flashes of that. He showed flashes of a rookie who isn't ready yet. I would take the no doubt about it star who's performed at this level over the chance for a wide receiver to be great when, let's be honest, and this is something that I don't really discuss on this podcast a lot because it's kind of negative. Winning organizations don't draft wide receivers top 5. They just don't. It's never worked ever in the history of sport. Larry Fitzgerald, they never won a Super Bowl. He got close. He's a bad example. Everybody else, it's like, Calvin Johnson, how did he do? Keyshawn, it's like, I would do it.
So here's the argument for Dallas if you're doing that. Trading away Micah for, let's say, 2 first-round picks. Let's make it simple.
Make it simple.
2 first-round picks, one of those picks being 16. I don't think Cowboy fans get all that excited. Yes, they've been good drafters, but getting 2 first-round picks, 2 unknown players from Micah isn't that exciting. But if Marvin Harrison is one of those players, and now you're talking yourself into, okay, it's Dak, it's CeeDee Lamb, it's Marvin Harrison Jr., and our pick that we have at 12, we could turn this into the highest scoring offense in the league, and then we'll just try to add depth on defense. Again, this is not a perfect trade scenario for Dallas, but getting a star back like Marvin Harrison Jr. on a rookie contract, because wide receiver 2 is probably the biggest need on this Cowboy team right now. You fill that need with a quote unquote generational prospect. I think Cowboy fans can at least talk themselves into it.
Damn, that went away. I didn't think it was going to. I didn't know we were going to do hypotheticals. That's why you don't script this stuff. No. You just have conversations with smart people. I would, and in a heartbeat, maybe a little tough to say. I think in any sense, I want the proven entity. The thing that I've seen at this level work every down when healthy, and Micah Parsons has been that since from the jump. And there's no reason to believe that Marvin Harrison Jr. won't be. But you don't win Super Bowls drafting wide receivers and then paying them $130 million. You don't. It doesn't happen. It's like what AJ Brown and Devontae Smith make that combined this year, or with their extension. So it's fascinating. Of course, it's not going to happen, and it would benefit both sides if that Travis Sham mockery of a trade proposal went through. Both teams would win, and that's what you want all around. Now, with the Cardinals wide receiver, it would be terrible, but you've got Travis Kelce, you've got the new George Kittle, you've got your number 1 option. So I don't know, Marcus. But, there's no way that it's going to happen. And
no, I can't imagine what Dallas fans would do after trading Luka Doncic and Micah Parsons in the same offseason. That's another reason why it would never happen. I can't – Dallas sports fans would just quit life at that point. But could you talk me into a scenario where that's maybe better for the long-term health of the team? Maybe, just because you would be so loaded on offense and then you could throw a bunch of picks at defense. But then again, I think Micah Parsons is on the track to being a Hall of Fame edge rusher, and he's 25 years old. You don't give away those guys very cheaply.
I agree, unless you were 77. So listen, one last thing, and this is another, reason why I even broached this to begin with. How's it working with how the Cowboys are doing things now?
Well, it's not great, right? I think
with that, why not try something wrong? Like, that was my rash. It's like none of 30 years.
You know, the thing is, it's frustrating, Alex, is they have a GM in Jerry Jones who literally cannot get fired. So you are in a perfect spot to make moves like this because there's no risk in being wrong other than that your team might be bad, but there's no risk in you losing your job. The Cowboys should be one of the most aggressive front offices in the league because of their structure. They're just not, because what they want to do is just be a consistent contender year over year. And they don't want to push assets into try to winning Super Bowls now. And that's why you end up where you're at.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. It's a great conversation. I want to have it again. I probably have to wait about 6 weeks before having it back on before we do it again. Marcus, tell people where they can find you, man.
Yeah, at Marcus_Mosher on Twitter. Check out the articles on 33rd Team. Also, Locked on Cowboys, Locked on Dynasty. Lots of good talk on both those podcasts.
Alex Clancy, Locked on Cardinals. Remember, without you, there is no me. I'll talk to you tomorrow.